All right, awesome. Well, welcome everybody. This is the San Francisco Rose Society. And if you can please have your screen on mute, if you can please mute yourself, that would be great, except for Rebecca, who is our speaker. So let's go ahead and get started. I know people are still joining, but we do have a full program today. So welcome to the San Francisco Rose Society. My name is Heather DeLul, and I am the Vice President of Programs here at the San Francisco Rose Society. For those of you that are new, and maybe this is the first time that you're joining, just a little bit of a background of who the San Francisco Rose Society is and what we do in conjunction with the Golden Gate Park Rose Garden. So San Francisco Rose Society, you might not know, has been around actually since 1941. And we are, yeah, if you wouldn't mind muting yourselves, that would be really good. There is one person, or Marianne, maybe you might be able to mute them as well. All right, there we go. Thank you. So a little bit about the San Francisco Rose Society. We are a nonprofit organization, and we really focus on three main things. We focus on how to grow beautiful roses, rose arrangement class, and also rose gardening best practices. And between the months of January and November, the San Francisco Rose Society, in partnership with the Golden Gate Park, offer interactive programs, lectures, workshops, rose garden tours. I'll be going through that. I'll show you when we're going to be doing those. Monthly rose shows, and we meet every second Sunday of the month at 1 o'clock Pacific time. Moving forward, we will start doing hybrid programs. I was telling Rebecca a little bit earlier, we're going to be having our live events in the Rose Garden at the Golden Gate Park, as well as do them virtually so we can maximize everyone's attendance. So welcome for today. Going to, let me see here, my next slide. I love this photo. This was our Rose exhibition show that we did on Mother's Day at the Golden Gate Park in the Hall of Flowers. It was an awesome day. We had so many exhibitors come out and show their roses. For those of you that may not know about it and coming today for the first time, the Rose Show is typically held on Mother's Day, and we had hundreds of roses that were exhibited by rose gardeners. And we also had rose judges that selected the winning roses, and the winning roses were there for mothers at Mother's Day, on Mother's Day. So it was a really, really fun event. So going over the program for today, I will kind of show you what the upcoming programs are for, I think, through November. Today, we're going to be talking all about English roses. I love English roses, and especially David Austin English roses. So really looking forward to a really great presentation today. And then for Q&A, what we're going to do is you can ask your questions during the presentation in the chat box, and then Rebecca would prefer that you keep your questions until the end of her presentation, but you can certainly put them into the chat. Okay, for the rose calendar, also before I go into that gorgeous photo that's right there, is different categories at the Rose Show on Mother's Day. Here were two categories that you can see: hybrid teas, grandifloras, and hybrid tea. Oh, they're both hybrid tea grandifloras, two different sections. And all the roses that were being judged for that category. A lot of fun. All right, so for our calendar, today, obviously, we're doing the All About English Roses. Next month, we will be meeting at the Golden Gate Park Rose Garden. We're going to be showcasing rose arrangements for beginners. This will be a workshop, a live workshop. And it's going to be headed by Barbara Gordon, one of the best rose arrangers in the Bay Area. And you're not going to want to miss this. It's going to be totally great. We will be doing a virtual of it as well, but always, if you can make it to the Rose Garden Golden Gate Park, definitely worth your while. Then next month on August 14th, we're going to do a rose garden tour. This is a favorite of all of our members and all the people that actually go to the Golden Gate Park to get a tour of the rose garden. Clayton Jones, who is not only the president of the Rose Society, but is also the gardener for the Rose Garden at Golden Gate Park, will be heading up the tour. And for those of you that have done the tour before with Clayton, it is a lot of fun. He really goes into detail on the history of the roses, and it's very interactive. So definitely, and we will be doing it virtual as well as live. And so you won't be able, you can't miss it either way. In September, we're going to be doing our annual event. Our annual event is not exactly a picnic. It's a little bit more things that go with roses, like champagne. So we're going to be doing our champagne gala in the Rose Garden. You do have to sign up for this one. Well, you have to register for all of these events. It's free of charge, first of all, but especially a champagne gala, you do have to register. You can't really just show up for it. And we will be doing some rose arrangement workshops at that event too. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then our last event of the month is in October. We're going to be doing a field trip to a rose farm in the Bay Area. I have a feeling it might be in Sonoma in the wine country. But we haven't finalized which one we're going to yet, but there are definitely a couple options on the table that we're considering. So stay tuned. We will definitely let you know about that shortly. All right, let's see here. A little bit about an advertisement here on our manual for growing roses in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a $30 book. You will, if you are interested in something like this, everything you need to know about growing roses in the San Francisco Bay Area, just go to our website and you'll be able to find more information on it as well as order it. All right, so for today, I'm really, really excited to introduce Rebecca Koryatem to you from the David Austin Roses. And I want to give you a little bit of a background on Rebecca before we get started. She has a really neat, I was kind of getting ready for this morning, and some really great things, Rebecca, that you're doing that I'll be happy to share. So obviously she's the US executive for the David Austin Roses, but prior to David Austin Roses, she served as the garden editor for Southern Living magazine. She's also an award-winning writer and designer and an active member of Garden.com, which is a nonprofit organization that provides diverse interactions for professionals in the field of gardening communication. She's also served as a judge for the International Rose Trials. That's so totally awesome, Rebecca. And that is no small thing. And she's also serves as the society board member for the Northern California, it's not the society, I think it's the Arboretum, right, for that area. So we're delighted to have you. And what I will do now is stop sharing my presentation. Okay, and turn it over to you. So there's the stop sharing. All right, all yours, Rebecca.
Now I will share my screen. Let's do all our technical stuff first. Make sure that we're up here and going.
And gorgeous roses behind you too, Rebecca.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you all so very much for inviting me to occupy an hour of your Sunday afternoon. It's always a delight to speak to Rose Societies because you're one of our biggest advocates. And, you know, I'm one person that covers the US and Canada for David Alston. And the Rose Societies do an amazing job of supporting our brand. Our roses go to your showroom tables so many times. And we love your enthusiasm. So thank you so, so much. Many of you may have gone to England to David Alston, to our headquarters. And this is the Lions Garden there at David Alston. And it just kind of sets the mood for our talk. David Alston roses are so, so very versatile. You have trees, you have shrubs, you have climbers, there's ramblers. They can be turned into hedges. You can put them in containers. So, you know, whatever you want your rose to do, there's really a rose in our collection for you. So, you know, it kind of comes to the question of what makes a rose special. And sometimes it's a name like Olivia Rose Alston. You say, I have a granddaughter named Olivia. I've got to have that rose. Mr. Alston was very, very excited and passionate about naming all of his roses either after something from the British arts or literature. You know that he loved Shakespeare, and a lot of our varieties are named after Shakespearean characters. Carding Mill is named after a beautiful Welsh valley. Olivia Rose Alston is named after his granddaughter. And when he brought out Olivia Rose Alston, and Poet's Wife was also brought out that year, it really was a massive turning point for him in his breeding program. And he felt like, this was in 2014, okay? He'd been in business for a very, very long time. But he had a breakthrough that combined all the attributes he was interested in. So here's sweet Mr. Alston. We lost him December of 2018. But when he started, he was a young guy in his 20s, and he really envisioned an entirely different kind of rose. If you know anything about Mr. Alston, you know how passionate he was about the old species roses, because that had the fragrance that he fell in love with, and he loved their charm and grace and beauty, but they only flowered once, and they only came in like whites, blush, pinks, and some crimson tones. So about the same time, these modern roses were coming out on the market, and everyone said, why do you want to mess with these old species roses? This is where it's at. And he did recognize, you know, there are some attributes there. They repeat bloom. There's an amazing color range, but the fragrance wasn't there. And he thought they were a little too stiff. They didn't quite have the grace he was looking for. So he bred the two and came up with a completely different type of rose, which he dubbed the English rose. A lot of people think English roses are old-fashioned or heritage roses, but they aren't. They are their own little category. And this quest really revolutionized the garden world as we know it today. And it's something that we at David Alston are very serious about pursuing and keeping going. So here is Gabriel Oak. This is one of our newer varieties that has come onto the market in the past few years. And it is quite nice. I think it's going to do very well in the Bay Area. One of the things that I am seeing, I just came back from visiting one of our growers in Oregon. And in the Pacific Northwest, we have had on record the worst year for rainfall and low sun days that have ever been recorded. That's not great for roses. But I will tell you this, you know, Mr. Alston, when he was doing these crosses, in the beginning, he was really interested in fragrance and beauty and grace and repeat bloom. But as the program continued, you really became even more focused on disease resistant. And I'm here to tell you something. The newer varieties, when I'm walking the fields and I'm walking the garden centers, the newer varieties are significantly more disease resistant than the old stuff that many of us love. The form is better. It's a prettier shrub in the garden, and the remonancy is even better. Let's go into this. So this is the rose that kind of started it all. It was Constant Spry. It was introduced in 1961. Oh my God, look at this flower. What is not to love? This had the big romantic voluptuous blooms that he was after. It had the fragrance. It was just, he was so excited. But guess what? It really wasn't what he was after, because why? Constant Spry blooms only once a year in early summer. A lot of folks think if it's a David Austin rose, it's got a high petal count, it is extraordinarily fragrant, and it has this certain look to it. But these are all David Austin's singles, like Kew Gardens or Tottering by Gently, a semi-double like the Lark Ascending, incurved would be kind of like Royal Jubilee. You have the quartered roses like Lady Gardner, rosette shape like Munstead Wood, a shallow cup like the new Emily Bronte, an open cup, deep cup like Benjamin Britten. So we are very diverse in what we are bringing to the market. And there's a reason for it. We aren't just growing flowers for a show table. We aren't just growing to see how many petals we can put out there. Mr. Austin had a vision that he wanted our roses to be an integral part of the landscape. And if any of you are garden designers or you have a passion for design, even floral design, you can't use the same type of flower for everything. You need variation, you need coarse texture, you need something more loose and open, because that's what makes our gardens and our floral designs more interesting. So there are two aspects or characteristics that rarely get chatted about, and they were two characteristics that Mr. Austin really found charming. One was the button eye, like you see here in Emily Bronte, and the other is the halo effect. So with that button eye, he just thought it was a really charming, kind of that boutonniere look. And in Imogen, Munstead Wood, Port Sunlight, James L. Austin, the Lady Gardner, Albright Rambler, and more, you have that sweet little center that adds some focus and charm to that rose. Now, out in social media land, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that you can hear and listen. I have actually seen people say, well, these are fading out on the edges. This was actually a characteristic he bred for, is called the halo effect, where the outer petals are lighter and it becomes deeper inside. And I'll tell you why. I was a garden editor for Southern Living magazine for 15 years. And anytime you asked a stylist to bring in a rose for a photo shoot, especially indoors, they always looked for something that was an English type rose. And the reason being, Mr. Austin bred those petals to be like alabaster, where the light would pass through them so they would dance in the light in the garden. If you are a photographer, you know how important it is to have that variation, because it makes the rose look like it absolutely glows. And it's a wonderful attribute to have. So let's talk about some newer pinks that have come out on the market. This past September, I went to one of our trials at one of our growers on the coast of New Jersey. It gets quite cold there in the winter. It actually can get quite hot and humid. And Silas Marner was only I'm thinking maybe a year and a half old, has a vase shape to it and was covered with blooms in September. You know, a lot of times our roses do their last hoo-ha towards the end of the season, but I was really blown away by the number of blooms on Silas Marner. The health of it was fantastic. It's got these nice, a little bit narrower, shiny green leaves. You see that button eye, and you see some halo effect in there. And Silas Marner has a lovely old rose fragrance to it. I saw the form greatly improved. I saw remonancy greatly improved, and the amount of blooms just blew me away. Eustacia Vi is a little bit smaller rose. Look at this little bit flatter type flower. I love that there's hints of apricot and yellow in the center of that one. And Eustacia Vi has this lovely fruity fragrance, and I think is going to be a winner in a container. She and Gabriel Oak came out about the same time, and it also has a nice fruity fragrance to it. So, talking about pink, because everyone loves pink, but what do you think is the most significant color of David Austin Rose? I'll let you kind of think and answer to yourself. That would be yellow, and I'll tell you why. Graham Thomas was introduced in 1983, and it checked all the boxes of what Mr. Austin was looking for. It repeat bloomed, all right? That's what Constant Spry couldn't do. It had this big voluptuous flower that he was after with a higher petal count. This color yellow to us now is not a big deal because we see it. Julia Child has it. But back then, this color yellow had not been seen. And so it was a big deal. It has a heady tea fragrance. It was vigorous, it was healthy for the time. And it really embodied the best of the old and the modern roses. So that's why I think that, you know, hands down, this was his most significant rose because it really got him on track of doing what he wanted to do. Now, 1961 to 1983 is a long time to have your head down, being patient and working through the trenches. You know, a lot of people think he came on the scene and he was an instant hit, but he wasn't. And it took a lot of work and a lot of flops. There are some varieties that are out there that came out before Graham Thomas, but this one just really did what he wanted to do. So today, Poet's Wife is an amazing yellow. My Poet's Wife is now going on 4 years old, and it was dug up 2 years ago when COVID kind of first started. I uprooted and repositioned my entire rose garden, which was no small task, especially with some plants that were starting to get larger, but they became even happier, and I'm really seeing the rewards now. If you can see kind of behind me, back in there, these were all cut from my garden this morning. And if you see the yellow let's see, that's kind of right there, that is a Poet's Wife. And my rose looks about like this Poet's Wife that you're seeing there. Now, a new yellow that has just come out, I guess Vanessa Bell's been out for about 2 or 3 years now, but it's new, relatively speaking, is Vanessa Bell. It has an amazing green tea and honey fragrance to it. At these trials in September, this is another one that absolutely blew me away. Phenomenal foliage, because what are roses? Roses are flowering shrubs like a camellia, like a rhododendron, but we tend to think of them as being these little precious entities that need lots of hard work, lots of babying. Mr. Austin recognized the fact that not all of us are master gardeners or master rosarians. He wanted to make roses easy and beautiful and rewarding for the average person. Sometimes we get family members that need our care. Sometimes we just can't be there in the summer to water and prune and deadhead and spray. And that is his whole goal with this program. And that's something that we are continuing. The Poet's Wife, we categorize as a fruity fragrance, and it is a citrus scent. So very nice. So there are some new things coming in on the scene too. The Country Parson, also introduced about the same time as Silas Marner, is this lovely pale yellow, that creamy halo around the outside with a yellow center, incredible disease resistance. This one, I believe, Country Parsons, is a fruity scent. Fruity scent. Has that little bit of a button eye. Now, this has a lot of Scottish rose heritage, so there's a lot of thorns in there. If you are okay with the thorns, I think you're really going to like this rose a lot. I was pleased with it when I saw it. This one, Bring Me Sunshine, was introduced this year. And I am very excited about it. It has hints of orange and yellow and some slight pink and blush to it. I think it's going to do well in the US, but it has not been introduced yet. So what happens, because our headquarters are in England, everything is introduced in England first. We trial things here stateside to see if we think they're really going to work. Not everything that does well in England does well here. Because remember, we are the United States. We are incredibly diverse. Just think about California. You have snow, peaks. How many microclimates are there in California? You have desert. So when we pick roses to bring and grow in the United States, we're looking for something that can grow coast to coast. Because why? Field space is limited. We don't have our own little special farm. David Austins are grown in the fields in Arizona and California with everyone else's roses. And you only have a certain amount of field space. So we have people ask us a lot of times, oh my goodness, I loved Glamis Castle. Why don't we have Glamis Castle anymore? Which also had a lot of thorns. Beautiful, beautiful flower, but we're in the world of breeding roses, and better roses are our business. So if you only have a limited amount of space in a field, you have to make some really tough choices. And that's where some things start getting retired and dropping out of the system, and newer things start coming in. Carding Mill, which you're going to see in a little bit, is grown here, but not in England, because it likes our heat here. And just a little more heat, a little more sunshine makes a world of difference on that rose. So they don't even grow Carding Mill over there. This is Roald Dahl. It starts our kind of series of luscious apricots. This is a rose that Mr. Alston's team bred because he recognized that when you're a landscape designer, you're needing a good transitional product. You're needing something that can work with whites, creams, yellows, and work into a lot of other colors. And Roald Dahl actually does this. It is a good transitional plant. I'll tell you what else is amazing. The remontancy on this is phenomenal. This will finish flowering and kick out more buds before you can say boo. And if you're a good person at deadheading, or as I say, making flower arrangements, because cutting to make flower arrangements is the same as deadheading, which is the same as pruning, you will really be rewarded. But we're very pleased with this variety, and it's a great one to have in your garden. Lady of Shalott is a little bit older, but I have to say that is one of the best roses in the United States. You can see Lady of Shalott behind me. Here's the apricots here, and then a little bit more back over there. Just outperforms herself. This can be a large arching shrub, as you are seeing here. I absolutely love how it's mixed with the ornamental grasses. If you plant Lady of Shalott or Teasing Georgia against a wall or a fence, it will just about espalier itself. It's got very pliable stems, and I think that's the best way to utilize that rose. Over on the left-hand side of the screen, you see Grace, and it was a lovely older rose. But I tell you what, Roald Dahl and some of our newer varieties have superseded it. And I think there's better stuff out there. So if you're a Grace fan, I would start looking at some of our newer varieties like Roald Dahl, even the Lady Gardener, and I think you're going to be a little bit happier. So here's the Lady Gardener, lovely halo, a little bit of that button eye. If you like to cut flowers and do arrangements with them, this particular rose does not shatter as fast as some other things. And it's really good for cutting. Carding Mill, we already chatted about. Lovely, almost melting sherbet hues to this one. You can see pinks and coppers and yellows in it. Really, really delightful and a nice fragrance as well. So let's chat white for a second. If you can see this right there, that is Desdemona, and that is what you're seeing in this container. Desdemona is quite lovely because it comes out with a pink bud, and the new roses have this lovely light blush tint to it. You've got incredibly healthy foliage. And then in all of the rain that we have had over the past month, you know, my roses budded up about 3-4 weeks ago. And I'm like, it's going to happen this week. It didn't happen. It's going to happen this week. It didn't happen. They stayed there in bud for almost a month because our weather has been so difficult here. But I had no problem picking or clipping some Desdemona flowers because these hold up so well in rain. And I know you guys there in San Francisco have a rainy season and then things dry out for you. But this is a really nice, very healthy shrub for your area. It has an amazing old rose fragrance with hints of cucumber and lemon zest. That sounds like a cocktail to me that I would love to drink. So it really is a delight in the garden. It's hard to have good white roses, especially when you're in a rainy climate. And Desdemona will not disappoint. A lot of folks like Winchester Cathedral. This was our mainstay white. And if you take a peek in there, you see that there's some hints of pink on some of the petals. Well, Winchester Cathedral was a sport of Mary Rose. And it's white. It has a lovely old rose fragrance that's nice and strong. It had these lovely dark green leaves. It's still in our system, but to be honest with you, Desdemona is the better plant, and it will start kind of taking over Winchester Cathedral's spot. We will always sell Winchester Cathedral, but I think the quantities are going to start declining and Desdemona quantities will start going up. Another white that everyone loves is Claire Alston, heady fragrance with a little bit of a vanilla background to it. And this one goes back to, you know, what do you want your roses to do? I know a lot of you that are rose enthusiasts, you're like, I just want to buy the newest variety. And you have your roses in containers and you're using them to cut to take to the showroom table. But if you're a designer or if you're really trying to create a garden setting, there's a rose that will do something for you, believe it or not. You've got your climbers, your ramblers, your tree roses, those for beds, containers, hedges. So look at that void in the garden and say, what do I need to happen here? Do I need something that's a shrub? Do I need something that's a tree? Maybe I'm running out of space, so I need to go vertically. You know, a lot of people forget about going vertically when they're running out of space. The David Alstons are incredibly adapted to a variety of soils. 30 European countries could fit inside the United States. So think of how diverse that is. You know, I cover the US, so I see things doing well from San Diego up through Vermont. And it's amazing how forgiving a plant can be. I'm asked a lot, well, what is the most cold tolerant? Which one takes drought? Which one takes shade? Roses are a lot like people. First of all, they start off like children. Don't train your children to be needy. Don't overwater them. Don't pamper them too much, or they will become bullies. All right. The other thing is, roses are like people in that they adapt to where they are planted, or kind of have to learn how to become adaptive. If something is in San Francisco, where it very rarely gets super duper cold, and all of a sudden it drops down into the 20s, your rose, which is used to being in a very mild climate, could get winter burn or flag. Whereas we are selling it into Minnesota, Albany, New York, and they have already kind of adapted to the climate there, and they make it through winter just fine. We always tell folks, and this still causes a lot of people grief, plant deep. If you have a grafted rose, plant it so that that graft is about an inch or two below the grade of the soil. If it's an en-route rose, the crown should be about an inch or two below the grade of the soil. It helps with wind rot, and it also helps the plant overwinter. So here's a little peek at this year's Chelsea Flower Show. I think we won our 27th gold at Chelsea. But it really, it was nice to be back at Chelsea. Nice to kind of have the team that puts Chelsea together, get to work together again. And on press day, these are just some little vignette shots. The first one is Queen, or the Elizabeth Rose, which is the new introduction over in England, along with Bring Me Sunshine, that honors the Queen in her Jubilee year. There's Joan Collins, one of our many celebrities that came through, a Chelsea Pensioner, which, you know, I've never been to Chelsea personally, so I had to request that they share these with me. I'm always busy and don't get to go to Chelsea, but perhaps next year I'll just let my customers wing it for themselves and I'll steal away for Chelsea. David Alston Jr. up at the top. This is Mr. Alston's son, and he has really been instrumental in the business for over 20 years now. And he is greeting Monty Don of Gardener's World. I know many of you are familiar with Monty Don and probably enjoy watching him. And just another peek at our display garden there at Chelsea. So kind of fun. So I am asked a lot, when are you going to introduce another red? I did a very similar presentation for the National Rose Society program that was back in, I believe, September. And at that time, we thought we had a new red to introduce. In the foreground here is LD Braithwaite. And everyone loved this rose. It was our most fire engine red rose we've ever had in the collection, which is unusual for us. Most of our stuff is more of a blue-based red. That's Munstead Wood there. Darcy Bustle also looks pretty similar to that, but a little more of a crimson hue. And in our trials, we weren't pleased with what we saw. It's hard to get a good disease-resistant red. So we're back at the drawing board. Yep, we could have released it, but Mr. Austin was notorious for policing himself, more so than anyone else. And so in his absence, we are trying to be as strict as he was. And we just didn't bring this new red forward, but we're working on it. So in the interim, these are the reds that we have for you to enjoy. Reds can add a lot of depth to the garden. Tessa the D'Urbervilles, when I was doing these grower tours, looked amazing, very vigorous, nice climber. Benjamin Britten is an excellent rose if you want to try to train something as a pillar type rose. It's very upright and vertical. Pollinators can get down in there. You can see some of the stamens, lovely fruity scent to that. Darcy Bustle, I was saying, is a little bit lighter in hue than Munstead Wood, a light fruity fragrance. Thomas à Becket is kind of an unsung hero. It does not look good in the pot in the nursery, in my personal opinion, but once it gets in the ground, you will be rewarded with a lot of smaller crimson blooms. And then Munstead Wood, everyone adores the fragrance of Munstead Wood, but I'll be honest with you, it gets more black spot than we want. It also can get rust. Over in England, it gets rust, and we are breeding to find a replacement for it. You know, Mr. Austin's name is attached to all of these roses. And while Munstead Wood was top notch when it was introduced, we know we can do better. And that's why we're looking to breed something even better, but still fragrant. I think you saw Gabriel Oak early on. That is very, very heady, fruity fragrance. And that might be a good tie over for you until we get something that's a little more deeper hued. A lot of folks are afraid of English rambling roses. I think they hear the word rambler and they go, it's going to take over my children. It's going to engulf the barn. But you know, ramblers are actually quite forgiving because the stems are very pliable. You can plant them at the top of a retaining wall and let them cascade over. If you have a lot of space you need to eat up, you can plant them and just let them go woof. You can treat them like a climber and train them over an arbor, let them go up a tree. A lot of the ramblers have a little bit of a musk fragrance to them. And with all of those stamens exposed, that means it's excellent for bringing pollinators into your garden. And we're going to talk about fragrance a little more in the next few slides. So, well, here's the slide where we start talking about fragrance. So you would think, you know, all David Austins are fragrant. We have a rating from 1 to 5. A lot of beginners will say, oh, I'm only buying the ones with a fragrance rating of 5. Well, as new roses come into the collection, we will shuffle. Now this one is more fragrant than this one. So this may have been a 4. Now we're dropping it down to a 3. This is Strawberry Hill. I think, Heather, you told me this is one of your absolute favorites. This was taken in a David Austin display garden in Osaka, Japan. So what does that tell you? This rose can take some humidity and some heat. But amazing fragrance. If you love Abraham Darby, I always steer folks towards this rose because I think the foliage looks a little bit better. Fragrance is elusive, and you would think, well, if I'm going to cross, say, Abraham Darby or Strawberry Hill and Gertrude Jekyll, both amazing smelling roses, I know that I'm going to get the most wonderful smelling rose in the world. Not necessarily true. It is incredibly tricky to breed for fragrance. Scent comes from the petals and or the stamens. And in the musk roses, it's going to come from the stamens. Regular roses, all the other fragrance profiles, it comes from the petals. Now, if you have a hybrid musk, bingo, you are going to get fragrance from both the petals and the stamens. This is something really interesting that I didn't even know until last year. In the petals, the rose oils that perfume or create the fragrance start in the bud stage about 3 to 4 days before the bud opens. Yesterday, I was at Cornell Farms in Portland, Oregon, and they had a Harlow car that was stunning. You can count on Harlow car to just have amazing fragrance. I was there 3 years ago giving a talk, same week, and that rose was so heady and so fragrant. And I put my nose down in it and I got nothing. And I said, what's your temperature like here, like over the past week or two? And they said, it's actually been quite cold. So that hinted to me that perhaps while those fragrant oils were forming, it was cold, and if it had been warmer, we might have gotten even better fragrance out of those blooms, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So in stamens, you will often have this musky or clove-like fragrance. You'll see that in our fragrance descriptives a lot. And cloves actually are an antibacterial and preservative. So isn't that kind of cool that in the stamens, where all that important pollen is, it is being protected by the clove oil chemical. That's pretty cool. And then we mentioned that with the hybrid musk, you have fragrance coming from both the stamens and the petals. So let's go in and chat a little bit about these 5 fragrance profiles. Myrrh, hands down, is the British's favorite scent. And it has this warm, anisey fragrance. I have, let's see, right there, that is a gentle Hermione, which I plucked out of the garden this morning. And my God, I love the fragrance of that rose. It's amazing. Also, Bathsheba. Oh, look at Bathsheba. We see that halo effect. We're seeing both pink and yellow apricot to give an overall apricot hint. That is an amazing climber and a very, very heady myrrh fragrance. And then, of course, Boscobel. I think everyone loves Boscobel, and definitely a heady myrrh fragrance there. So tea fragrance smells just like you have opened a pack of fresh China tea. It's got that spicy note to it, and you normally find it in yellow or apricot hued roses, but it can also be in Princess Alexandra of Kent and Princess Anne, and those are pink tones. Vanessa Bell that you see here on the left is actually smells like green tea and honey, which is amazing, especially covered with all those blooms. That's really fantastic. And then Charles Darwin, an older variety, but smells amazing. And then Lady of Shalott, which just does well everywhere. That lovely kind of soft copper hue. And you can see Lady of Shalott woven out throughout my collection back here. So old rose fragrance is what you think of when you think, what does a rose smell like? Gertrude Jekyll was probably one of Mr. Alston's favorite fragrances and roses because of that old rose fragrance. The new Emily Bronte has that lovely little flat flower, a nice texture addition to the garden. And what's cool about it is that not only does it have old rose fragrance, but it also has a tea fragrance to it. So you're there in California, if you're a wine enthusiast, you know when you're doing a wine tasting and you have your first nose, you kind of smell the grape. And then you take a sip and you run that wine through your mouth and you aerate it. And as the flavor starts developing, you can pick up, okay, it came from this soil, it was aged in this type of barrel, and you pick up all the subtleties. Well, with rose fragrance, you pick that up too. As the rose ages, you have your first nose when it blooms. And remember, the big full-blown flower is not going to be the most fragrant. It's the flower that is ready to be pollinated by the pollinators that is going to be the most fragrant. And that's not always the one that is full-blown, right? Fruity fragrance, not gonna lie, we Americans love fruity fragrance. Jubilee Celebration smells very jammy, like raspberries. The Gabriel Oak that you saw earlier, very jammy. Poet's Wife smells like citrus with kind of a lemon curd under it. And then also Eustacia By, wonderful in containers, has that jammy, fruity hint to it. And you can even have like Imogen, which is a newer variety, and Tranquility are very light fragrances, and they smell like a sliced fresh green apple. So very nice, very subtle, but there's a time and place for every fragrance. Musk fragrance is not that groovy Jovan musk that we all kind of snicker about, but that is a really heady scent. A lot of times with musk, you're going to see exposed stamens, like with the Tottering by Gently, Litchfield Angel, even Molyneux, which is a yellow, has a combination of tea and musk fragrance. That little bit of it's kind of a honey scent. There's a spicy scent. A little bit of musk fragrance really wafts through the air, and it really draws in the pollinators. So there's your whirlwind David Alston presentation. We covered a lot of ground. Do you have questions that you would like to ask?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. This has been amazing. I do want to open it up to questions, and I think what we will do is just take yourself off. I was looking through the chat and no one really had any questions in the chat. So I will just let whoever wants to ask a question, just take yourself off mute and go for it.
Sounds good.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
I'm your craziest fan out there. I always love your presentation. You know, I listen to all your channel from my podcast, YouTube, and follow you on Instagram, everywhere. I listen to your because I listen to you every week, every day. So, and I just want to say thank you. I mean, it's never enough of your presentation. So thank you.
You are so sweet. And you know, I wish I had more time. I am not a social media influencer. I kind of sneak these little presentations and things in when I get some downtime. And I've had a lot of people say, when are you going to do another one? And I'm like, I don't know. I have a really busy day job. And so whenever I can, I will give you some more YouTube fodder. So
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question about Joe the Obscure.
Yes.
We really like it, and I just wanted to know whether it will be good for San Francisco. And we are also hearing that you are phasing out of this variety, whether that's true or not.
Well, here's what happens with Jude the Obscure. There are certain rose variety, and yeah, oh my God, Jude the Obscure smells so good. We say it has hints of, it's a fruity fragrance. It has hints of wine drops, which is a British candy, and a little bit of Sauterne wine. It is absolutely delicious. It smells so good. It is one of those roses that in the field, does not always lift as well. Like you have to plant a lot more of it than you're going to get to harvest. So it's a tricky thing. It is an older variety. We will never fully get rid of something. It will always be available at davidaustinroses.com. That is our online retail site, but it won't be in huge supply. So you have to like kind of jockey around and get in there and order it. The reason we don't make more Jude the Obscure is that we have to allow field space for some newer stuff that's coming down the pipe. So I know you love it. A lot of people who can't find Jude will go for Woolerton Old Hall. It has a similar color. It's very fragrant. It's not quite the same fragrance as Jude, but you are in a group of folks, the people who love Jude the Obscure are mad for it. And thank you so much.
How would it grow in San Francisco?
It's going to grow fine. Now, the reason we are not growing it as much is it does get black spot. It is a little bit older variety. Mm-hmm. And in your winters there and springs, I have seen more black spot on it. But if you're aware of that and you are willing to be preventative, I think you're going to be fine with it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca.
Yes.
Rose Gilardi.
Hi.
I thoroughly enjoyed your program. It's absolutely fabulous.
Oh,
you make me want to buy more. I grow several of the Austin roses, and I do love them. But I found that not all of them grow well in San Francisco. I live in the Sunset District, so it's very moist, and the petals, when they're thin, they stick together and won't open. But there are a lot of them that do open, and the fragrance on all of them that I have is very, very strong. Different ones.
Yes.
I have been to the original garden in England. It's heaven, that's all I can say. And if anybody goes to England, please don't pass up David Austin's garden. I can highly recommend it. I've been to many, many gardens all over the world, but it is heaven. It really is beautiful. Thank you for your presentation. You are so enthusiastic about these roses, and it's just a pleasure to hear you speak.
Oh, thank you so much. And what you're looking at right now is the Renaissance garden at David Austin. With COVID, they had to kind of shut things down, but the gardens have reopened.
Yes.
I'm not sure if the cafe has opened yet, but go in for tea if it has opened when you get back over there and when you get over there, because tea, which is really like lunch or dinner to us, doesn't always mean something sweet as we think of tea. They had the most amazing salad that had asparagus and little fresh soft boiled eggs on it. Delicious.
They do a beautiful tea there.
They do a beautiful tea. They surely do.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask another question? That is a fragrant climber for our big pergola. Mm-hmm. I'm liking rose in the San Francisco coastal area. Mm-hmm. And which one would you recommend? Fragrant.
So for fragrance, are you looking for a particular color?
Not really. Fragrant and
just fragrance. Well, Bathsheba is one of our newer ones, and it is a 5 fragrance rating and a heavy myrrh scent. Strawberry Hill, also myrrh if you're looking for a pink. Now that is not going to get as big. If you need a really big climber, the Generous Gardener is going to be more of a blush color, and that's going to have a little bit of musk, a little bit of old rose scent, and a hint of myrrh in it. It's going to bring pollinators into the garden, so that would be really nice for you. Lady of Shalott is a climber, but I think Lady of Shalott is better espaliered. I don't foresee her covering an entire arbor, the Bay Area, to be honest with you. So those are all highly fragrant, really good varieties. One of the things I will tell you, and I do not sponsor these folks, they don't sponsor me, but one of my good customers told me one time, she said, Rebecca, do you know what azomite is? And I said, no, I do not. And she said, I want you to take this box home and try it. So azomite is this little mineral that is mined in Utah that comes from a volcano. And it's not a fertilizer, but it remineralizes the soil. And one of the things that I found, and in San Francisco, this is important, it makes the cell walls of your leaves stronger. It makes your stems stronger. Some of the old David Austins had droopy head syndrome. And the newer varieties, that's not a problem, but some of these older ones did. I found, and I'm in Black Spot Central here in Washington State, I found that when I use it, and I put it down in March when I'm starting to see my new leaves come out, and then I will do it again in late June, early July. I just throw a handful out on each plant. It really does help with making the leaves have more turgor or be a little thicker, so that little black spot pathogen can't hook its hooks in and cause issues. So that's just a little tip I always share with folks, and that may help you guys out a little too.
Please name the product again.
Azomite, AZOMITE. And there's a company called Back to Nature, I believe, that carries it. It's a little natural box. I bet Berkeley Hort or somebody like that in the area would carry that product or something similar. So,
Thank you.
any more questions?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I had one quick question. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Your slides, Rebecca, we have a couple people here that are from our Orlando Area Historical Rose Society. We meet at Gardens, and we might give you a run for Black Spot. We don't know. We might compete, but we were very excited to know that you were you run the trials, which is so important.
Yeah.
And you are introducing some more disease resistant, and we
Yeah.
really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And we'll probably invite you to speak to our society. You would absolutely love it if you would like to.
Sounds great. Well, and for you guys in hot, humid areas, we're located in Tyler, Texas, for the United States. We get heat and humidity.
Oh,
but
yeah. Well, Mike is a good friend of ours, and he knows how it is here. And he helped launch our society 26 years ago.
Fantastic.
He's awesome.
Fantastic. Yeah, the newer varieties are a must for you guys. In that heat and humidity, you can have heat, you can have humidity. Heat and humidity, no one fully understands it until they've been in it. And it can wreak havoc on a rose. And in your area where it is both hot and humid, our roses do better when they have morning sun and some protection from the hot afternoon sun. So place them in your garden where they're getting that morning sun, and then from 2 o'clock on, they are getting a little bit of filtered light. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. We try and do that. Everything works better in morning sun because in Florida, the peak of the day, we get sunburn. Our roses are. So
absolutely. Well,
you are
thank
absolutely
you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Rebecca. Take care.
Sure thing.
Can you commenting on our golden celebration as a climber in San Francisco?
You know what? Golden celebration is actually a large arching shrub,
Mhm.
but it here's something to wrap your head around. Any rose can be trained as a climber, but how tall do you want it to climb? Do you see what I mean? So like I have seen people take golden celebration and on a picket fence, train it along a picket fence. And it was a much better option than Graham Thomas, because Graham Thomas would have enveloped it.
Mhm.
But this way, so it's all about, we have tall climbers, you have medium climbers, you have short climbers. Sometimes you are better going with a climber or a shrub rather that has pliable stems like Golden Celebration, and letting it be a low climber per se than taking something that gets so big and has a very harsh woody stem and training it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So it's possible to grow golden celebration as a climber.
Yeah, you sure can. You
Yeah.
sure can.
I grow it in San Francisco as a climber.
Wonderful.
It goes over an 8-foot fence.
Wow. So see,
Yeah.
I had Old Mansion Inn in St. Augustine, Florida, was telling me, and these were bare root roses we sold to them this year, that Lady of Shalott is already 7 feet tall. Can you believe that? The roses like some heat. They really do. They love a cold winter and they love heat. They will go. Florida, you're not going to really have the cold winter, but they are going gangbusters in that heat there. So it is possible.
Hello, I'm really enjoying this. I'm sort of new to roses and I live in the Twin Peaks area of San Francisco, so I deal with cold and humid, I guess.
Okay.
Do roses tolerate that? I don't want to get into roses because I do love them and the fragrance, but I don't want to have to deal with rust or, mildew issues.
I would look for the newer varieties. The more humid the climate, anything, and so Lady of Shalott will totally work for you. Anything from like a 2014 introduction, which was like Olivia Rose Alston, The Poet's Wife, moving forward through these that I chatted about today, you're going to be fine with. Desdemona's going to do quite well for you. So there's a lot of stuff where I think you're going to run into some trouble. I get asked all the time about Evelyn. Evelyn is on social media. There's a reason, right? Look at me. I'm the David Austin rep, and I'm speaking to you folks out there. There is a reason we no longer carry Evelyn at wholesale. Why? Because even though the flowers are gorgeous, and even though the flowers smell so good, and even though Evelyn can work in certain areas of California that get zero humidity and be okay, we know from our trials that you are not going to be successful with this rose. It's going to get black spot, it's going to get rust, it's going to drop its foliage. And when we are looking at trying to produce something that makes you look good nationally, that is not the rose for you to grow. So that goes against a lot of this wow on social media, doesn't it? So people go, why don't you grow this anymore, Rebecca? Why don't you do that? And it's because we have your best interest at heart. That's why there's Roald Dahl. That's why there's Desdemona, The Poet's Wife, Emily Bronte, Vanessa Bell, Bathsheba. That gives you every single color and fragrance range you could ask for. I just got through doing grower tours. All the people who grow my roses for us to distribute to the garden centers, guess which varieties look the best and healthiest and have the prettiest form and the most buds? The newer varieties that I was talking about today. So I'm doing this to help you, not to try to say, back in the day, Graham Thomas was an amazing rose. Abraham Darby was an amazing rose. Munstead Wood was an amazing rose for its time. But we are trying to be more disease resistant. I have garden centers that aren't allowed to spray. So how bad does that look if you're all excited about going to your garden center to pick something out and you see rust and powdery mildew and black spot all over it? Not too good. So they're our partners. We want them to look good and we want you to be successful.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Rebecca, thank you for that comment, because this is so hard to get across to people that the newer varieties are not to be babied like the older varieties, and you really don't need to spray. I haven't sprayed my garden for 5 years.
See, there you
It
go.
took time for them to adjust, to realize that they're not being babied. And they were sulking for a couple of years.
They will.
But they caught on pretty good. Now they said, well, so we're not going to be babied, so we're going to have to step up to the plate. But the newer varieties are definitely less disease resistant. And thank you to the hybridizers for doing that.
Yes.
Because roses have a reputation of being prima donnas, and you have to spray them every week and you have to baby them, and they're just not doing what you want them to do. Well, that's not true.
You're right.
We have to get over this.
You do.
So we
And
have to spread the word.
I will leave you on this note. Right now, whether you're buying my rose, Weeks's rose, Certified's rose, Star's rose, Cortez rose, Bailey's rose, it has been no better time to come into the rose fold than now, because all of the breeders are breeding for fragrance, disease resistance, repeat bloom, and they want you to succeed. So with that, go enjoy. And as Rosarians, take all these new folks coming into the fold under your wing, teach them they don't have to have an arsenal of chemicals, and to enjoy. You really can't kill them. You can't mess up. Just don't overlove them. That's the big thing.
Right.
So thank you.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Rebecca, very much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure, guys.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you to everyone joining today. Don't forget, our next program is going to be on the second Sunday of the month, which is on July 10th in the San Francisco, in the Golden Gate Park Rose Garden, and you can register on our website. And thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.